Okay. Hi, Anjali. All those new people who are joining, I can see some new names.
Sir, you are a host now.
Okay. Thank you very much, Firoz.
I'm leaving, sir. Okay.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
So, let me put on my screen. Hi, guys, and welcome to all the new people who are joining. Just in case you want the PPTs, you can send me a mail on abhechavla13 at the rate of duck.com. You can send me a mail and I can share the PPTs with you. And the way we go about in this class is you can stop me at any moment of time to add, if there is something that you wish to add to whatever I am speaking or to ask a query. We have nothing like end of the class questions. You can ask at any moment of time. You can raise a hand or you can interrupt. Not an issue at all. And you can also value add. A lot of you might have had a lot of field level experiences which they would like to share. Sharing is always welcome. Good afternoon, Rajni. Are you able to hear my voice? Okay, great, great. So let's start the class. I'll stop the video, takes the screen out. So today we have till now in the last few classes done case studies on the Asian diaspora. Okay. We have done case studies on Asian diaspora in which we covered East Asian, we did South Asian, and we did West Asian. Then we moved on to Africa, where we did North Africa, we did East Africa, we did West Africa. For some reason, South Africa, because South Africa is in the country, but there are more countries in South Africa. This was not a part of the unit. I am typically following your course material, which would have come to you or would be coming to you in terms of how the units are structured. More often than not, the framework, broad framework, I'm picking up from the course material, but a lot of things I add. So, for example, if I'm not satisfied with the course material, I add a lot of stuff in the class, in the PPT, and the idea is that you need to have multiple perspectives for people who are joining today. Please understand academics and scholarly pursuit is more like a point of view. There are many perspectives to it. We do not talk about right and wrong and good and bad. The right and wrong and good and bad can be left to the politics and the ideology and the various other things. In academics and scholarly, we look at perspectives, and each aspect of study can have multiple perspectives. Diaspora and migration studies typically is an interdisciplinary subject where you sometimes dwell in history, sometimes in anthropology, in geography, in political science, in sociology, in psychology, and so it's a beautiful subject, and you get to know so much. And in the course and in this particular unit that we are doing there, we are moving to the European diaspora, and under European diaspora, British diaspora. Till now, whenever what we have gone through in terms of Asia and Africa, we have looked at the fact that diaspora migrations typically have happened because of wars, because of poverty, because of lack of opportunity. And more often than not, most of us understand, or we have been made to understand, that West is that perfect place where things are just the ideal thing, and everybody from the world wants to move to the West. Today, we will see that is not the case in terms of there are other things which happen. We will also, I want to bring in a new aspect of diaspora studies today. In fact, till now, every migration, we've got to broadly understand that diaspora is dispersal, but how does migration move into diaspora? Are all migrant groups diaspora groups? There are other processes which come about. Also, a large part of the study made us feel, or made a lot of people feel, that as soon as a large set of people migrate, they go and form a diaspora. Let's look at another perspective of diaspora, and this is the time to introduce that. I thought this was the perfect time to introduce that, especially when talking about British diaspora. So let's start with the objectives. We are looking at scale and nature of British diaspora. We also need to understand, or ask this question: do Britishers leave Britain, the United Kingdom? You'll be so I went back and did a little research on the history of United Kingdom. Uh, United Kingdom came about in the 1700 or the 18th century through a treaty between the England and Scotland. That treaty created the larger United Kingdom. But understand also, United Kingdom, it comprises of England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. And then there is Ireland, which is a separate country in a way. The Northern Ireland is under, under United Kingdom. So how does the migrants from Britain actually form a diaspora? Can they be called a diaspora? So and so forth. So we are talking about migration history of Britain and the links between British diaspora and their homeland. To recap, most definitions of diasporas include dispersal of a seemingly homogeneous group. Mind the term seemingly. We also have seen, or a lot of you would have experienced, that no group is homogeneous. Whether you take a religion, you take a caste, you take a country, you take a state, no particular group is homogeneous. Yet, we say the dispersal of a seemingly homogeneous group, often due to catastrophe or violence. We have seen that inevitably a lot of people move when there is violence, there is political instability, and the presence of multiple similar groups in different geographical locations that are trying to build a home away from home. So, similar groups. So, when we say multiple similar groups, this involves a lot of defining as to what we define as similar groups. For example, when we were looking at Afghanistan diaspora, we realized the fact that Afghanistan diaspora could not be even called a diaspora. They were quasi-diasporas because Afghanistan is split up into multiple ethnic identities, and inevitably everybody carried their ethnic identities. So today, for example, India, when we look at Indian diaspora itself, there is the South Indian, there is the North Indian, there is the East Indian, there's a Northeast Indian. Among that also, there are multiple divisions. And the second aspect of diaspora, a desire or at least a faint aspiration to return to the homeland. And Cohen and Safran were one of the earliest people to give this definition. In fact, a lot of times it comes across as a feeling that the initial set of diasporic studies only looked at the Jews in terms of diasporic formations and the definitions and the scholarly pursuits. Over a period of time, things have changed. Also, a lot of literature kind of gives you a feeling that diasporic groups are permanent categories. reduced to specific histories of migration. So, for example, uh, uh, you know, uh, we look at various countries and when did that migration happen. So, when we were looking at African diaspora, we looked at the 18th century when the slaves were taken, or in the 19th century when educated Africans started moving, or the 20th century. So we kind of look at it in terms of broad-based categories, making it impossible to understand diaspora mobilization without making essentialist claim. We always feel there is an essential reason to this formation of diasporas. Now, that premise itself can be wrong, because one perspective which aims to avoid such reductionist and essentialism is the understanding that diasporas as situational, relational, and contextual process. So, how does migration groups or people who migrate come together to form diasporas? That itself could be, yes, Ashish?
It's Aisha.
Ashash.
That's what
How do you
Aisha,
pronounce
yeah.
it? How do you?
Aisha.
Aisha. Okay. Tell me, Aisha.
Yes. I just wanted to ask, can you explain essentialism?
Essentialism is what is essential for a particular thing. For example, for example, uh, we almost feel that digital technology is essential for having transparency in government work. So you will hear a lot of media stories coming, almost trying to tell you that that once a organization or a government office or an individual goes digital, it leads to transparency. It almost feels like that's an essential condition. So, for example, a whole lot of diasporas that we have read almost comes across as there has to be a war or a victimhood for diaspora formation. But that's not the case, because inevitably there is never a deterministic formulation in making out things in the real world. Aisha?
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you.
So inevitably, whenever you see a deterministic reason for any problem or issue that you are trying to comprehend, obviously that's a reductionist way, because human beings do not operate in a linear fashion. Human beings operate in multi-dimensional fashion, and there are multi-dimensional forces operating at the same time. Aisha?
Yes, yes, I understood. Yes.
Okay. So,
Thank you.
is that diaspora also formation is because of situational, relational, and contextual process? What is the context for the formation of diaspora? What is the reason why migrants who have traveled away from home come together in the form of a diaspora? There has to be some reason. Diasporas also come into being through mobilizations. They are projects, stances, and practices rather than groups. Say, for example, the initial study of the Jew diaspora and the concept of the Jew state was the reason why the Jews got together, because their homeland, over a period of thousands of years, they were moving away from that homeland and they wanted to come. So there was a contextual reason. And after World War II, when Israel got established, we have also to understand the place they were established was also the place where Palestinians were living. So when we look at today, for example, when we look at the Israel-Palestinian conflict, it's a very reductionist way to say that this happened, so this led to this. Oh, there is a larger history to it. And more often than not, scholars and academicians look at multiple perspectives. There is not a single perspective. Do not go by media narrations or, political narrations, because there is a larger aspect to what happens in any particular community. So through mobilization, they are projects, stances, and practices rather than groups. With diaspora formation is not a predefined destiny. There has to be other things to it. And in fact, in today's time and age, with a global connectivity and the presence of internet and digital media, the mobilizations are on a different stance or of a different level. In fact, I was reading this paper about conflict deterritorialization, how the conflicts are moving from homeland to hostlands, and from hostlands to homelands. They are moving very fast because there is a mobilization of diaspora. So it has become so much complex and interesting to understand it. They can dissolve and stop existing, or they can expand by mobilizing more individuals. And today, as I said, with peer-to-peer messaging, with social media, with internet, they can expand or dissolve. With this perspective, there are a number of diasporization processes which lead to diaspora formation. So this is a new perspective, and this may help you in understanding whether there's a British diaspora or whether there is a European diaspora, and what led to a British or a European diasporas. So let's look at the scale and nature of British diaspora. Several million British nationals who live abroad permanently or long-term basis. In fact, the number of British nationals living abroad actually outnumber the 2.9 million foreign nationals currently living in the UK. And look at the disproportionate media coverage on the foreign nationals living in the UK. And little literature on the British nationals living abroad. Now, I'll also show you how the framing matters, how they have framed, how even scholars frame things in a particular way. British diaspora is a multinational diaspora made up of people from England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. In addition, it is a multi-ethnic group, including British citizens who have been born in British diaspora countries in which they currently live. It has been difficult to quantify number of Britishers abroad, because I'll tell you in the next slide why is it difficult to quantify numbers. So, for example, there are small communities in, let's say, Chile, in China, in France. British had become mass immigrants by the early 19th century. Long before that, they had already become the main incoming population in North America and Australia. So a large chunk of population in Australia and North America is actually Britishers. But do these Britishers form a diaspora? Maybe not. In fact, they would not even have this faint glimmer to go back to their homes. They had their overseas presence in Africa and Asia too. Remember, Britain was almost colonizing the whole world. If we expand the categories of Brit abroad to include those who can get a British passport and those who claim ancestry, the size of the diaspora grows rapidly. So now the fact is, 1 million people, 1 million Brits settled in Australia. And if you go by their ancestry claim, then all of them are actually Brits. In many countries, people are entitled to a British passport because of their ancestors. So, as I said, Australia and America are two places where there's a large population with British ancestry. Yes.
I just wanted to add that in US as well, the original inhabitants were sorry, I forgot what they're called.
The
Not
native Indians,
aborigines,
the
but
native Indians.
the native, the Indians, you can say. So they were the indigenous population of
Correct.
America, right? And then
Correct.
they were colonized, and so basically, I think, or I mean, we could say that all the white people in America have descended from the British, right?
Not all of them. In fact, that is a very interesting and an ironical aspect of America, that inevitably all people in Europe, America is largely populated in the initial wave by Europeans, and most of the Europeans who were deviants, who were rebels, who were against their established political orders made America their home. And now the same people and their descendants want to stop people from emigrating to America. So that's quite ironical, because even Donald Trump is an immigrant. So most Americans are actually descendants from Europeans, and then subsequently South Americans, Asians, Africans. Africans also hold a large part, because almost 17 to 20 million African slaves were taken to America. So yes, you are absolutely right, Aisha. For example,
Aisha, no worries.
Aisha, sorry,
No problem. It's okay.
I am much comfortable in a classroom kind of setting than an online setting, because I cannot see everybody. Even I can't read the names when the screen is on. So I keep, getting confused on that.
No,
Okay.
no worries. It's
Okay.
okay. Yeah.
Thanks. So, for example, according to 2006 census, 7.9 million Australian residents claim British ancestry, and 12 million Canadians and 28.6 million US residents. So if I was to look at this, are they all constituting British diaspora? No. Therefore, it's safe to say that British diaspora is highly varied, both within the countries of emigration and it between different countries. Finch in 2010.
I have an interesting story.
Yeah,
I mean, you said you could
tell.
share
Yes.
incidents.
Tell.
Actually, I know somebody, a person, a friend of mine, and he also got his British citizenship when he was, I think, when he turned 18, actually. But
Okay.
what happened was they lived in a village in Gujarat,
Okay.
and one day while they were going through some of their old stuff, they came across a trunk in which there were some papers relating to, I think his grandfather was in South Africa at some point when it
Okay.
was colonized by the British, and they found
Okay.
some papers, and I don't know what exactly the process was, but they went to the embassy and they got British citizenship.
Yeah.
So just randomly one day, like they were in a village in Gujarat, and then suddenly they are British citizens overnight.
Absolutely. So, for example, people of Goa initially
Yeah,
were getting automatically Portuguese citizenship.
yeah.
So, see, this is a part of the colonial deal that happened, and that is why. So, who's British and who's claiming out of ancestry is, that it's very confusing. Thank you for sharing that story, Aisha. See, I've got your name now. Okay. The identities in British diaspora were more complex than understood. Those who claim Britishness, such as French Canadian, Aboriginal people, Afrikaners, Cape Colored, there are all kinds of people. As Aisha was telling this story, guys, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. As Aisha was telling this story, you do not know where does this Britishness come in, because remember, at one particular point of time, British was colonizing the whole world almost. So obviously there are multiple ways that there is a British connection. Britons living abroad are also Britons living abroad, like any other community, are not a homogeneous group. They hail from different demographics, socioeconomic background, moved at different times to different countries for different reasons, which we know, as we have studied in the Asian African diaspora. Yes, it is not easy to get citizenship now. We know that. In fact, they have come out with this bizarre scheme of sending immigrants to Rwanda, which is only the Brits can think that. Okay. So initially, the US attracted a large number of immigrants from agriculturists, most of whom were farmers. a lot of Irish island or Irish people moved to America when there was this great potato famine in Ireland. In fact, there's a large Irish community in America. But once the American Civil War had ended, migrants began to push industrial and urban opportunities. 19th century, most migrants from England and Scotland who made their way to North America settled in the industrial Northeast. And we have also seen how various diasporas changed, or various migrants, profile of migrants changed as time changed. For example, when we looked at Chinese, immigrants to the US, we looked at the fact that initially they were workers, they were working in railroads. Then current Chinese who are moving are younger, more technically qualified. This is generally across this story across the world. British migrants also established a number of ethnic clubs and societies, historically fulfilled a wide range of civil. So St. Andrews or St. George societies. In fact, we have St. Andrews and St. George societies in India also, were a key means for migrants to link up with other members of the diaspora, provide opportunities to form bonds of friendship, business, and even marriages. Before social media, they provided some of the most effective networks. In fact, a lot of religious activities are a way of making networks. So that was that. This is the kind of movement which happened from the British Isles. This was an article in the Daily Mail. I couldn't get hold of the article because it was not opening, but I was able to get the visualization. Look at Australia, 1.2 million, US more than 500,000, Canada, big populations moving. There is a Oh, that's New Zealand. New Zealand is less than 500,000. So that's how the people from Britain moved. No, it's not Bangladesh, Aisha. It's New Zealand. There are Brits in Bangladesh, but 313,850 is New Zealand.
Oh, okay.
Estimated 22.6 million left the British Isles between 1815 and 1914. So obviously these million people settled somewhere, they intermarried, their offspring came about who intermarried. During the 19th century, US remained main beneficiary of British migrants, New Zealand, and there was a growing tide in imperial destinations. So we all know that 40s to 60s restriction of British migrants entering Commonwealth countries were minimal. That is how they traveled, and settled in various Commonwealth countries, 40 to 60 restriction. Second half of 20th century, British emigrants became increasingly skilled. 2/3 of all Britons who leave do not seek. Now, the interesting part to note out here is inevitably, there are two things that they have written. British immigrants became 2/3 do not seek employment abroad, which is what Asians and Africans do when they leave their countries. So essentially, even the Europeans are leaving Europe to seek employment abroad, basically aspirational. And the last sentence, if you notice, who are retiring or taking early retirement abroad. Why would somebody take an early retirement abroad? Obviously, because staying abroad, let's say staying in an Asian or African country, is much more lucrative for a Brit or for an American than. And look at the fact that Asians and Africans move into the West for better opportunity. The Americans and the Europeans are moving into Asia and Africa for a better life because of the conversion rates of their currencies. So compared to the West, the global South is much more cheaper. And that is possibly one of the reasons why people from the West would like to retire in Asia or Africa. But look at how the framing has happened. It almost feels like they had a choice, but they would like to come here for retirement. Obviously, it is an aspirational thing. It is for a better life, and which is the reason why most migration happens. The dominant motivations for emigration seems to be positive. So positive attributes to the place emigrants would like to go rather than negative attributes of UK. Obviously, if a person is retiring abroad, UK is costlier for that person, which actually becomes a negative attribute, but that's how it has been framed. The main motivations for why people emigrate can be classified as four: family ties, lifestyle, overseas adventure, work. Essentially, also aspirational, which we have seen in the Asian and African migrants. So do not get confused in the fact that Asian and African people are migrating for opportunities and the Europeans are not. Everybody migrates for opportunities, aspirations, and better opportunities. Yes, Aisha, absolutely. Okay, so now the question comes, is there actually a British diaspora? The expression of British diaspora was first used in a conference in 1981. Robin Cohen subsequently developed the idea as a part of his concept of imperial diaspora, left their homelands to establish colonies. Imperial diasporas are typically who went to all the colonies to man that colonies. Cohen nevertheless argued that the expression diaspora can be applied to a large number of European migrants who were commandeered to people the colonies. So these guys were actually told to go rather than either forced or voluntary. They were in a particular job by which they were asked to go. What makes these imperial diaspora is that the European states were closely and competitively involved in supporting colonization. Was one of the highest in volumes and one of the longest in duration. Considering the extensive and lengthy process it was, not surprising that the emigration took many forms. Now, again, an academic or a scholar particularly looked at it and defined it in a particular way that we can call them the British diaspora. Some moved as exile. Now, also need to understand that even when British or the European powers were colonizing the world, it was not that there was no political opposition out there. There were people who, for religious or political reasons, were also exiled. Some were sent as convict or as illegitimate children. So a whole lot of processes. That's what we were talking about, essentialism. It was not essential that it was done only because they were colonizing. There were other processes at work. Many, like the Irish famine migrants and those dispossessed in the clearance of Scottish Highlands, were also forced to leave by grinding poverty. In fact, the interesting part of Britain and the India comparison was when British was colonizing, India was one of the biggest countries in terms of GDP under the Mughal rules. In fact, if you can Google and search it out, you will figure out that India was actually the way India and China's GDP was much higher than the West. And one of the reasons which is never brought into narrative, was that these colonizing powers took the material and the wealth of India and China and, had their industrial revolution. So remember, Aisha, a lot of today what we consider as morality, for example, the homosexuality law, India or the Orient were much more liberal, and in fact, the whole Orient, especially India, was much more liberal in their outlook. In fact, India was quite a melting pot in the sense of various people across the world. Whenever they were, they had a problem, they were victimized, they used to travel to India and settle down. India was a great place to settle down. There was a lot of cultures, subcultures, which were existing parallelly. This morality that we are experiencing is a gift of Britain to us. We were much more liberal and open in terms of sexuality, in terms of gender, roles, in terms of worldviews. And you can see it when you go across India. So now this particular Victorian morality would classify as legitimate and illegitimate children. So, for example, this English nobleman had this illegitimate child. That particular child would be sent out of, so that there is no scandal, or the fact is, some sense of Victorian morality. Aisha?
Yes, I'm listening.
So you got it?
Yeah, that's so hard to believe that they used to just send off children to a different country.
But see, if you look at Game of Thrones, have you seen Game of Thrones?
Yes.
Inevitably, they were called the bastard children. They were the whole concept of illegitimacy and legitimacy was more like Victorian morality, which was imposed on the world. So all these, criminalizing gay sex, everything has come in the IPC based on Britain. It was not a part of India. India was much more. Let me tell you this interesting tale. I was meeting some Georgian diplomats. Georgia is a country in near Armenia. So Aurangzeb, Emperor Aurangzeb, killed his elder brother Darashikoh. Darashikoh had a concubine by the name of Udaipuri Mehel or Udaipuri Begum, who supposedly was a Georgian lady, had a Georgian ancestry. And when Aurangzeb killed his brother, this particular lady, Udaipuri Begum, became a part of his harem, which clearly shows there was much more liberty in terms of choice, in terms of sexuality, in terms of movement of people. And when we categorize the time in terms of a particular religion or a particular caste or a particular region, it was not like that. It was much more fluid. And it was actually the coming of the Britishers which brought in or hardened a lot of ways, because they were importing a lot of their laws and norms onto us. Because remember, one of the ways they were subjugating the colonies was in terms of cultural construct, whereby they were saying that the British culture is superior to the colonies' culture, basically tending to make the people from the colonies insecure about their culture. Aisha?
Yes.
Okay. So, the usage of the term diaspora in reference to British national is much contested. That's why. The primary reason being they all settled within an already established English-speaking world and enjoyed an ease of entry into the British-derived societies and culture. So it was not that they were, it's not like the Asians and the Africans going and settling into the white world. They were already into English-speaking world which were colonized. So they were very much at home in a way. And that is one of the reasons why this term of diaspora is contested in terms of British. So that's one view. That's one view. Nevertheless, we can use the term diaspora to explore the migration experience of British from 1880s to the present. used as an analytical tool to question the assumption of singularity of British emigration, and experiences were different from those of other migrating people. So inevitably, some scholars have felt that we can use the term diaspora, though other scholars are saying that the diaspora as a term can be contested. And earlier, British diaspora was also created by a large number of Britons of all classes who were servants of the empire, the imperial diaspora. The British can also be seen as a global tribe who have seized international commercial opportunities abroad. Let me just quick move forward. Reinforcing an existing British world and were on the whole easily assimilated to it. And that is the reason why they're saying that British is not a diaspora. Because remember the fact, inevitably, diaspora formation happens when, a set of migrants reach a different culture, they feel insecure, and that's why they come together and form a group. But in case of British, they were ruling the world, they could go wherever, and there was no sense of alienation in terms of the host culture. Most Britons who live abroad maintain strong ties and allegiances with the UK. However, these ties with home do not into sense of collective. So one of the aspects of diaspora is a sense of collective identity when abroad. So, for example, the Indians and the Pakistanis and the Bangladeshis coalesce together, let's say in the UK or America. They are from South Asia. And in fact, in the Western world, Indians, Pakistanis, and Bangladeshis or Nepalis do not even are known as Asians. Asians are typically Chinese, the Koreans, the Vietnamese, the Filipinos. Filipinos is an absolutely different category. Communities of Britons living abroad are also divided by class, duration of stay, degree of integration. Nevertheless, British overseas to British diasporas, the migration can be seen in two phases. The first phase, 1880 to 1930, encouraged independent immigration from Britain and settlement in empire. And the second period, beginning 40s to the present, where British settlers overseas, even within the British Commonwealth, were treated as like migrant. So, in fact, the 40s to the present more so come in the form of diasporas, where now the Brits who have traveled tend to come together because now they are in a foreign, a different culture. A shift from British overseas settlement to British diaspora. So that's one of the ways to look at it. Though, again, as I said, these are multiple points of views. Change in composition of immigrants to Commonwealth countries and the decline of British privileges after World War II. Over a period, these communities evolved into self-conscious nation-states with national identities as a result of migrant scheme. So as the countries became independent after World War II, the British entering this country were no longer, looking at it as a part of the British Empire. Now they were migrants in these independent countries. In such scenario, the experience of the later British immigrants were more akin to a diaspora, because now they are moving into a different country with a different culture, and they need to bond together to be able to sustain themselves. Yes, Aisha.
So, if we talk about the British migrants who immigrated to, for example, USA early on, um, back when there was still indigenous people living, and I think those people, after a point, have kind of claimed the American identity, and I don't think that they would consider themselves British anymore,
Correct.
right?
Correct.
So, they would, when we talk about British diaspora, I don't think we would be referring to them, right? They wouldn't come under the, okay.
No. So
Okay.
more often than not, the later migrants after World War II, once the countries became independent and nation states got formed, then whenever Brits emigrated to these countries, if there was a sizable population, they would come together and they would have an experience akin to a diaspora.
Okay.
tendency to congregate in particular parts of Commonwealth, and we have seen this. We have seen this in the Asian diaspora. We have seen this in the African diaspora. The tendency to congregate in particular parts of the host country. For example, in Auckland, British immigrants are clustered in North Shore. In Australia, they're clustered in Adelaide, Perth, and Brisbane. British saw advantages. All communities see advantages of settlement in clusters, because such networks provide safe landing, information on securing housing. That is a generic human tendency, community tendency, and a human tendency. This does not mean that the diasporic experience of British migrant was similar to that of African and Asian immigrant. African and Asian immigrant already had the disadvantage of a colonized experience. A colonized experience, a backward country, an underdeveloped or a developing country, and then moving into a culture which was more developed, which looked down upon you, and so on and so forth. So the experiences are totally different. Most immigration during 60s and 70s was long-term settlement abroad. Since 80s, there have been a greater immigration by Britons into the European Union. In fact, now with Brexit happening, I don't know how things are. I didn't come across any later study whether the Brits are still emigrating. Though, I was traveling to Nepal, I came across this Brit who has settled in Nepal because Nepal gives him a very good lifestyle compared to what he would have got in the UK. A large proportion of this is characterized as lifestyle or retirement migration. Other emigrations have taken up new employment, are short and seasonal, while peeping labor for only a part of the year. So today, with all these digital diasporas happening, because people can move into countries and do jobs for anywhere in the world with the kind of internet and global connectivity is happening, the whole diaspora studies has turned on its head. So there is little about conceptualizing large number of diverse immigrants as a single diaspora. So large number of diverse immigrants, how do they categorized as a single diaspora? Something what is we've seen in Britain. British diaspora seen themselves more as individual Brits abroad, or have a citizenship of their country of residence, or dual nationals. British national immigrants have formed tight bonds with each other at some places, creating their home from home communities, isolating themselves. So it is not a very specific formation, though. More often than not, the Asian and the African communities are much more tight-knit because they need each other to help each other out, because the kind of relationship between the global north and global south is totally different. It is difficult to imagine the Britons living abroad would fit into one of the classic types of diaspora as defined by Cohen. Cohen had defined various classic diasporas. The modern is certainly not an obvious victim diaspora, labor diaspora, empire diaspora, merchant diaspora, or a non-territorial diaspora. Can be described as a global economic diaspora, a new category. Global economic diaspora, a lifestyle diaspora, a retirement diaspora. In fact, another new category which is coming up is a technical diaspora, where all these technical people who are moving for jobs connect with each other, forming bonds and helping each other. So these are a lot of new studies which are happening in the diasporic fronts. Let's sum up. One perspective which aims to avoid such deduction is that understanding diaspora as situational, relational, and contextual processes. Several millions British nationals live abroad permanently or on long-term basis. Living abroad are not a homogeneous group, hail from different demographic and socioeconomic background, moved at different times. Significant growth in number of British immigrants who are retiring or taking early retirement abroad. Expression first used in 81. In reference to is much contested, does not mean that it is similar to that of African and Asian immigrant. So it is every diaspora is looked at it in a different word. I came across this book actually I was not able to get the text of the book. If I'm able to get some PDF, if somebody is able to get a PDF, you can send it to me. So British and Irish Diaspora Society, Cultures and Ideologies. And there are some references. There are more references in your course material, which you would have got or will get. And I come to the end of this presentation. Any questions? Sorry. Again, let me write my email ID in case anybody wants the presentation. You can write to me. You can send me a mail. That's my email ID. You can send me a mail. I'll send you the presentation. So a lot of new people and quite a few older ones. Hi Swadesh, hi Veera, hi Vikas. Thank you, Namka.
Good evening.
Good evening. Any questions?
Hi, sir. Am I audible?
Yeah, Veera, your voice is little cutting, but yes, you are. Tell me, Veera.
Okay. Sir, yeah, coming to this British diaspora, as we mentioned, this one is multi-ethnical as well as a multinational diaspora like that. Sir. But what professions they are doing, sir, after coming the diaspora? Now, what professions they are doing?
What provisions?
Is there any evidence?
What provisions?
What professions? What professions?
Profession. Veera, did you say profession?
Yes.
So, for
That means,
example,
yes,
I
yes,
met
yes,
this.
sir.
I met.
They are
So they are into technical, they are into education. So I met this person in Nepal who has come in as a head of an institution. So obviously, coming from a developed country, education skill level is high. Again, that's not a needless, definitive reason. See, more often than not, any person who would travel out of their country would travel for a particular aspiration or economic opportunity. So, for example, today, look at the fact. Why do a lot of Indian students go abroad to study and then come back? Because they perceive that that foreign degree provides them with better life skills for job opportunities as well as for salary opportunities. The same would be applicable for British. So more often than not, humans work the same way. They need a sense of identity. They need a sense of belonging. They are aspirational, and I think that's where if leaders, political leaders across the world, when they actually are looking at how to marshal resources for their countries, it's either you can look at identity politics or you can look at aspirational politics, and more often than not, identity politics becomes much easier to handle. And that's why world over, if you see, a lot of world leaders go into identity politics rather than aspirational politics, because it's slightly more difficult. Veera?
yeah, understood. Yeah, understood, sir.
Okay.
Second question, most of the British diaspora settled in North America and Australia, Canada, and New Zealand. That means highly developed countries only. Because of they are colonized countries or industrially at that time, at the imperial
Colonized because of
industrialization
colonization.
stage, those are the highlighted.
Veera, initially, most of these
Okay.
guys moved because of colonization. Remember, in Australia also, these Brits moved, and they, in fact, there is something called it's called a missing decade, where the Aboriginals, they kind of killed and removed the Aboriginals So much so that there were very few aboriginals. In fact, there's a whole story and body of work about the missing decade, where they forcefully took children of the aboriginals to place them into foster homes. Remember, in Canada also they discovered skeletons in under churches or in schools, residential schools. So Britain has done, see, again, let's not put it and give it a name. Human beings throughout its history has been extremely violent. And right from the origin of modern human beings, wars and conflicts have always been a norm. Remember, we are part evolved from animals, na? Otherwise, think about the fact that 2 world wars where millions of people have died, and human beings understood the fact that wars never were able to provide a solution. Yet, war seems to be the first course of action for a lot of nations.
Yes.
Sorry. Any other question?
Sir, yeah, in this,
Tell
is
me.
there any climatic conditions similar to? Hello, am I audible?
You are in between.
Hello?
Your voice goes. Yes, in between your voice goes.
Yeah. Is there any climatic condition dimension? They are British diaspora mostly settled in these countries. There is no right. Only colonization is the reason.
Correct. In Britain currently, see again, how climate changes are affecting is not enough being documented. For example, it's being documented, let's say for Africa. We know Western Africa, a lot of climate changes are leading to migration patterns happening. How and Asia
No,
also
sir,
things are.
only,
Sorry, Veera.
but I am telling this is particular to the British diaspora only. They are from Britain, right? This is coldest countries, Canada and North America. These are the countries similar to their conditions only, right?
Correct. But the environment, the
Maybe
climate.
that is also one of the reasons.
No, but climate factor was not the. Possibly it also was happening that initial, when Columbus made his trip, obviously he found the Newfoundland or whatever, and Europeans followed that route and came to America. It could be the closest place. It could be the climate, and obviously it was the closest place. And when they found the climate similar to with Britain, it would have made sense.
Yeah. Yes, sir, understood. Last thing, as of now, we diaspora, that is Cohen has given, right? That is a trade and victim, and now we are getting new, that is global economic diaspora, technical diaspora, empire diaspora. These features only applicable to the Britain and the European diaspora only, right, sir?
Yes, of course. Because we cannot put them under victim diaspora, though, again, specific cases might come under victim diaspora, but larger sense would not come under victim or labor or the traditional definitions of diaspora. Rohit, can you switch off your mic? Okay, I was able to mute. Okay. So, Veera, you're right. Most of the British diaspora would come under the latest categories of diaspora that is now being, talked about. Veera?
Okay, sir. Understood. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Any other question? Okay. In case there is no other question,
I
great.
have one question.
Yeah, Aisha, tell me.
Yes, I just wanted to ask you. I don't know if this has been discussed before or what, but when does a diaspora stop being a diaspora?
See, again, this is what I introduced this time, that diaspora formations today can also cease once if they have been formed based on specific purposes. So, for example, look at the fact, let's say there is a group of young technical guys who move out to various countries to do a project, and then the project gets over, and while they are in various countries, they are connected to each other, they are from the same place, they make a network, and then the project gets over, they disperse and come back. So they are talking about the fact that today diasporas can be situational. It could be contextual. In fact, in this particular paper that I was reading, they did specifically mention the diasporas of Kashmiris and the Sikhs based on conflict deterritorialization, how the homeland conflicts are moving into diaspora formations and the reverse processes. It's a very interesting thing which is happening. See, the global connectivity and internet are bringing in some new complexities in the whole process. As I said, today, inevitably, if you're moving out of your homeland, you are connected to your homeland 360 degrees. You can see a video, you can do a real-time chat, you can do FaceTime. So how do you miss your home? You are very much connected with your home. So would you still be categorized as a diaspora?
What about people who have assimilated so much to their host country, for example,
Correct.
to a point where they are no longer, for example, in touch with their roots or their traditions? Maybe racially they are, but they have assimilated so much that they've adopted the other culture. So then, would you say that they are no longer part of the diaspora, or?
Aisha, again, the very interesting part which is happening with internet, social media, and this connectivity is the fact that a lot of people are getting mobilized. No, tell me one thing. A whole lot of NRIs in their second generation seem to be much more, concerned about the Indian politics than they are about the American politics. Or possibly they are equally concerned about the American politics and Indian politics, but they are already integrated into America. So what is happening is there is new diasporic formulations which are happening because of this digital media. So a lot of information, true or false, which comes their way, gets them into mobilizing in different ways. Aisha?
Yes, but say for example, if they assimilated to a point, like hypothetically, if they assimilated to a point where, for example, racially, for example, they are Indians, but they've adopted, for example, if they are in China, just as an example, and they've adopted, for example, the Chinese culture and they speak Chinese. So it's just hypothetical question. So would they then be a part of a diaspora, or they're
Yes,
just?
yes, yes, yes. Because how they get influenced with the media which comes their way. And remember, the diasporic formations also gets them some amount of gravitas in terms of a network. Remember, you are in a new country. Even though you might be second generation, see, look at the fact that African Americans have been in America for multiple generations, and yet there is a race problem in America.
True,
Aisha?
yeah, true.
So, wouldn't they be forming a part of a network to give them more,
Yeah, that makes sense.
security rather than being saying I'm American? And because they
Yeah,
see,
so
remember,
true.
societies are complex. Societies are not simple. It is complex. And inevitably, networks help people cope with uncertainties. Rajni, Anglo Indians they would be ancestrally with British, but they would not. I don't think so. They would be a part of a diaspora. because they would be part Indian, part British, and I think they would be more Indians than British. Rajni?
That was kind of my question as well.
Okay.
To what extent, like, can a diaspora stay? Like, when does it, like, for example, Anglo-Indians, if they're not considered part of the diaspora anymore.
See, again,
So,
it's not a question of consider or not consider. The point is, the diasporic formations typically are they are away from home, but the Anglo-Indians were possibly born out here in India. They were the Britishers who came out here, had local license, and the offspring were Anglo-Indians. So they were Indians. They had British ancestry, so they can claim a British passport, but they are not actually a diaspora. They are not even migrants.
Yeah, true.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Chalo then, it was good to interact with you, you people. Have a nice weekend, and we'll meet next Saturday at 3 o'clock, and we will be talking about the next aspect of European diaspora, the French diaspora. Bye-bye, guys.
Thank you so much.